Hello, anybody viewing? This is our episode 6 of Sound Off Talks Inspiration Series. Sound Off Talks is presented by Music Calgary, and we'd like to acknowledge this project's funded in partnership with Factor and the Government of Canada and Canada's private broadcasters. And I'd also like to take a moment to recognize that Calgary is located at Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. And today we're talking with Katie Tymochenko.
Tymochenko, yeah.
Tymochenko. She is a freelance journalist and a founder of Rock is Dead, which is a blog, and I think focused on rock music.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we're just going to hand it over to her. And I've always start these podcasts just asking what your aha moment was and how you got started working in music. So I'll just leave it to you.
Yeah. Well, I would say that my aha moment came from watching the Sound City music documentary that Dave Grohl directed. It was all about the Sound City studio in California where he recorded Nevermind with Nirvana. And he basically just talked about the history of the studio and everything. And it really inspired me to get into vinyl. So I convinced my dad to get out the old turntable and try and get all our records out, which he had been storing in a box on top of each other for a decade, which totally isn't good. But as soon as we got the turntable fixed, it was really cliche, but we put on Rumors by Fleetwood Mac, and I'm reading the liner notes, and it's thank you to the Sound City studio where we met. And I was like, oh my God, I love this. I need to work in music. And that's what I decided I want to work in music. So I enrolled into a school program then. I did the Humber College Music Business program, and it kind of just took off from there.
Amazing. So when did you watch this documentary?
That was in 2017. I had just finished my undergrad and was doing a lot of traveling, and in between backpacking, I'd have a lot of spare time on my hands. So I was watching everything, right? And yeah, it was that. And at the same time, the Foo Fighters also came out with their Sonic Highways CD, where they went to a different city to record a different song, and they learned about the history of each city and kind of put that into their music. And I fell in love with music history then. And so 2017 was a big eye-opening year in terms of music for me.
Nice. Amazing. Mm-hmm. When did you graduate from your undergrad?
It was a couple months before in 2016. So okay. Graduated, yeah, did a bunch of travel. I also found that year, my travels would be very connected to a certain band. I went down to South America and I was only listening to the Eagles. I was backpacking through Europe and it was only the Chili Peppers. And I was starting to make these connections with my experiences. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but.
Yeah, well, now they're all going to be connected to nostalgic memory through music, which
I think of course.
Is interesting. So yeah, you were traveling and then you just had that moment where you're I want to do music. So then you enrolled at Humber?
Humber. Yeah, Humber. It was the Humber Music Business Program. And I didn't really know anything about the industry. The only stuff that I knew was from those documentaries. And it was kind of I never really talked about that with my friends or family. So when I told them I was going back to school for not politics, what my undergrad was in, they were oh, okay, well, good luck type of thing.
Yeah. They're that's a shift.
yeah. And I just I fell in love with it. At school in my undergrad, I was always afraid to participate. I hated presentations. And then when I went into the music business program, I was sitting at the front of the class, trying to answer every question and being no, Katie, let other kids answer. I started to actually presenting because I was presenting about Stevie Wonder and Motown and stuff. So it was sweet.
Amazing. Awesome. Mm-hmm. So do you find that you more of the more classic music and rock side of genre?
It's interesting. I'm the youngest of 5 kids. So I think by the time I was born, my parents were done with NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys and Britney Spears. And we're just going to pump Paul McCartney and George Harrison into this kid, right? Nice. So I've always loved the classic rock. And I really didn't like new rock for a long time until I started Rock is Dead, my blog. And now I have much more appreciation. Plus, we're in a time now when classic rock is kind of coming back. You got a lot of bands that are doing that blues based rock and roll that, those sounds from the 70s. So it's a very interesting time for both old rock and new rock now.
Yeah, amazing. So in the schooling, did you study everything?
Yeah, so it was intense. It was like 2 semesters condensed into a summer semester. And we did sync and licensing, publishing, management, tours, publicity, communications. We did everything. The only thing I think we didn't do was music journalism, which is ironic because that's what I ended up in.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had to like plan fake tours. We actually got paired up with a real band and had to do a full marketing campaign for them. I really fell in love with sync and licensing. I thought I was going to go that route for a while. And yeah, they really show you like all aspects of the industry, and it's good because now people from my class, we've all kind of branched out into different areas of the industry, and now we have people to call on. If I don't really know anything about tours or promo or whatever, I can call that person that ended up in that field. So yeah, it was a pretty expansive program, which was good.
Yeah, and like a great way to get your foot in the door, and not because my education took 4 years of me like trial and error and being like totally blind, like crawling my way through it.
There's a mandatory internship that came with the program. So I did, my last 4.5 months, I was full-time at Universal Music Canada as an intern, where I learned so much. And it's just, you kind of just get thrown in there, you learn on the job. And yeah, that was a great experience too.
Yeah, nice. So from everything you've learned in the school, why did you go the route of journalism?
That is kind of doesn't really make any sense, because I had graduated and I was trying to get jobs, and I was spending all day either doing interviews or working on my resume, rewriting my cover letter a million times. And I kind of just needed something to put my creative energy into. It got like really mundane just having to like write a resume every day or send emails or do whatever. And I just needed something that I could do that was creative and fun. And at the time, I noticed like on the subways here in Toronto, like it was all ads for like Wix and Squarespace and all these DIY website builders that got really popular a couple of years ago. And then I was like, well, why don't I try and make a website? It'll be a music website. I don't really know what it's for though, and see what happens. But I didn't tell anyone I was doing this for a couple of weeks because I didn't know how to build a website or anything. And I made an account through Wix and started building, and a lot of it looked really ugly at first, but I slowly learned how to do it better. And I didn't start writing until it was about February when Coachella announced their lineup. And it was the 2019 lineup, and it was awful. I hated it, and I was so angry, and I just needed to get my frustrations out on paper. And I wrote this like Coachella lineup sucks piece. And that was the first thing that went up, but I still didn't tell anyone I was doing this.
Okay. That's awesome.
Yeah. And then a couple weeks later, it was the Super Bowl, and Maroon 5 was the halftime show. And again, I was like, Maroon 5, awful. That was a terrible choice. So my second piece, like they both started off kind of negative, but that's how it started. And then
yeah. I think journalism is all about opinion. So I think if you're heated and fiery about something and you can write about it,
Exactly. And like I didn't even know, like I wasn't doing interviews at the time, like artist interviews. I wasn't doing album reviews because I didn't really know how to do that. But like a couple weeks after the Super Bowl, the Walkman had its 40th anniversary, and I'm like, okay, let's write about the significance of the Walkman, because the Walkman actually changed a lot of how we listen to music today. And then it would just be random stuff like that. And it wasn't until I got noticed by other publications that I started doing album reviews, which is like a whole new ballgame in itself. But I would just write about what I wanted to write about. I remember before like Old Town Road got really popular, I was like, what is this like electronic country trap song? Like, what is genre? And I did this whole like existential piece on like how genres are going to go away soon. And it was nice because I could just write whatever I want, essentially.
Amazing. Yeah, I think that's like amazing. So you started your own platform that like no bounds, and that's a good way to learn.
And then you can, and you can make mistakes. And if I go back and read that stuff now, and I'm like, oh, like this is kind of terrible, but I leave it up because I think it shows I've become a much better writer over the past year.
Yeah.
And yeah,
like any artist, you don't take down your old album because it's worse than your next one. Like you show your lineage in that way. That's really cool. Yeah. Just taking the initiative is like the ideal.
Well, so many jobs too. It's like, oh, you need 2 or 3 years experience to do this. Well, I couldn't get a job, so I needed to make my own experience essentially. And, having the site was a good way to learn social media. I had to market myself. I had to, find new things to write about. I had to reach out to publicists, which I had never done before. So it was all just kind of creating my own experience to put on my resume, which I don't know if that really counts for jobs, but I say it does.
Oh, amazing. That's like the same kind of route I've taken, is just like, what do I want to do? And then finding a way to connect with that like community. Like I created a database website when I started because I wanted to know more artists in the city so that I could book more shows.
Yeah.
And it was just my list that I wanted to create, but I made it public. And then it just sort of like slowly built from there. But yeah, I think taking that into account, it's like, I want to do this. People want me to have experience. So how do you create your own experience to then be the person that people want to hire or like go to for things in the future?
And I think what people don't realize about music is, so like the music isn't all just these big major labels that have like a social media team and a marketing team and a radio team. So many of these smaller labels and indie labels, you're doing it all yourself. The guy who's doing the accounting might also be doing the Twitter updates, and the person who's doing marketing is also the radio person, right?
Yeah.
So just the more you know for music, and I think all entertainment industries, the better you're going to succeed if you can, have your toes kind of in everything.
Oh yeah, 200%. Like maybe 2000%. Yeah. It's a many hat wearing industry. I think most are in the creative sphere. So taking the initiative and like being able to start your own thing is like a great way to go.
Yeah. And plus, like,
have your own outlet forever.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And then it leads to like eventually the right people saw it. And I started doing more like structured content, not like just rants about Coachella or whatever. And then an editor named John Hutchings at Music Existence reached out, and they're a US platform. So they wanted a more Canadian presence. And then I started writing for them as their Canadian correspondent. And having like an official platform behind your name was like game changer. You kind of have street cred now. You can reach out to any band, any label, try and get interviews, festivals, concert show. And that kind of like was where it really took off for me, I'd say.
Nice. Amazing. So he found your work, and then, so what does he let you write about, or what does he pitch to you to write about for that platform?
So basically, when I was making Rock is Dead, I didn't know what like was legally allowed in terms of posting photos. Like I was like, I don't want to get sued by anyone or whatever. So I just reach out to photographers on Instagram and be like, hey, do you mind if I post? It was a Greta Van Fleet photo. And I was like, can I post this? And then that connection's made. We stayed in touch. And then, yeah, he offered me to originally just do strictly Canadian content and bring that Canadian presence down to Music Existence. But then it very quickly became like all rock and roll, like all the bands from the UK and lots of bands in these states, that kind of classic rock sound that's coming back that I mentioned before. I was interviewing all those bands. And I kind of became that like classic rock girl on the site, which I love.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah. And they're like, also Music Existence is not just one genre. They're hip hop, they're pop, they're weird stuff. It's amazing. So I have a lot of freedom on that site, which is awesome.
Awesome. That's awesome. And then you also write for Exclaim?
Yeah. So that happened at the end of last year. Again, new experience, very intimidating. Exclaim is so legendary in Canada, especially for the indie music scene. And yeah, a whole new set of writing guidelines, new editors to work with. And Exclaim is also where I really branched out in terms, especially this year, because this year, not a lot of rock bands are putting out albums right now. Rock really relies on touring. And when there's no touring, there's no music. So all of a sudden on Exclaim, I'm writing about Lady Gaga and Ellie Goulding and all these artists I never thought I'd be writing about, but it's taught me a lot. So it's been sweet.
Yeah, I think it's good to exercise, like, I don't know, like go beyond the genre that you're comfortable with.
Of course.
It totally makes you build or grow. I don't know what the words are I'm looking for.
No, for sure. Definitely. And I feel like when you work in music, it's very easy to become a music snob, which I can be at times. But, as soon as you open yourself up to like new opportunities, bands you wouldn't think you would go see, I actually learned a lot from doing these Lady Gaga pieces that I never thought I would. So it's good to keep an open mind with all that.
Cool. That's awesome. So what's next for you? In 2 years, you've done so much, I would say. I think 3 years from traveling to going to school to where you are.
Well, it looks good on paper, but now we're in a pandemic. So we've got to shift to a lot of, stuff with no live shows. It's been tough, especially because a lot of journalists and photographers rely on those live shows and those coverage.
Yeah.
So it's like trying to figure out how to do it online. Like I said, Rock is Dead is obviously rock focused. And with there being not really any significant rock albums coming out this year, at least from the big bands, it's kind of just like a waiting game to see what happens. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the fall. I think, you know, like Tyler Bryant just announced an album for the fall, and the Foo Fighters are sitting on one, and there's rumors of another Greta Van Fleet one. So I think the fall will be a bit better for our genre, but who knows? This year has just been big who knows, right?
We've all been derailed. I've like admired artists like being able to pivot or just figure out a way. And I think that's like the best part about in a creative industry, we can do that. And we're a little bit more open to doing that quickly. Some artists that just released albums have gone right back into recording. And you're like, you didn't even get to celebrate that album.
I know. Right back. Yeah, I think it's like the Killers too, just released an album and then they said there'll be another one out in 10 months. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. But it's also like, it's two sides because I want an album to breathe and I want to spend time with it, you know? Now it's like, I feel like fans are already excited for this next one. It's almost not fair to that first album. I don't know if that makes sense, but.
No, I fully get that. I'm a slow burn with music too. And I like to experience the album in entirety, but then sometimes someone will release something and then 2 years later it'll hit me and I'm like, I get it now. This really like, sings to me now, but didn't when you were released. I don't know.
I will sit on a band. I'll have friends recommending me bands for so long. And then like 18 months later, I'm finally like, oh, I checked them out and they're my new favorite band. So sorry, I didn't listen to them before.
Yeah, exactly. Who are you listening to right now? Who would you say is your 2020 like new finds that you have found through everything?
2020, earlier this year, I'd probably say Mountjoy. Mountjoy was the last concert I went to too. They were opening up for the Lumineers, but Mountjoy was so much better than the Lumineers. They were the last show that I went to in early March, which is crazy to think that I was at the Air Canada Centre with 20,000 people in March. And I just remember leaving kind of being like, maybe shows won't happen for a couple months. Like I wonder what's going to happen. No one knew it was going to be like this. But yeah, Mountjoy came out with, and the thing about that concert, you know, it's a good one because I couldn't sleep because I wanted to wake up early and just get all my thoughts out on paper. I was like, I need the world to know how good this band is. Everyone needs to go see the shows while they still can. And I had like little like sentences in my head, little hooks that I wanted to put down. And I just like, I never liked waking up early. And I remember that morning I woke up early and I was like, okay, let me tell everyone how good Mountjoy is. And they put out an album this year that was incredible.
Amazing. So when you go to a show, do you take notes at the show or you just sort of let it come to you when you sit up to write?
I do take notes. And it's kind of like, it's hard because I don't want to have my phone out, but I also don't want to be there like a grandpa with like a pen and paper. So I do take notes.
Like a grandpa?
Just like jotting down things.
Totally.
Some underground club or whatever. But I do take notes because like random things will come to my head. I remember at the end of last year, I saw this artist named Ruby Waters, who's from Toronto, I think, and awesome. And I was just like, she kind of sounds like a female Axl Rose. And I'm like, oh, what if I don't remember this tomorrow? Write it down. And just little tidbits like that, or things that it makes me feel, or if I'm kind of shocked, like I'll write everything down during a show and then reference back to it after. Same with when I'm listening to music for the first time. If I know I'm going to be writing about it, those first emotions and feelings that you get, I think are important to write down to kind of like go from there.
Yeah, 100%. And then you always are like digging into like back catalogs for artists to dig like references from, or just like align connections.
Sometimes, yeah, it's hit or miss. Sometimes I'm convinced that an artist is like going on some journey between records and I'm like, okay, how does that record relate to this one? What are they trying to tell us? Blah, blah, blah. But then if an artist is like, if I can tell it's just some sort of like curveball album out of nowhere, then I don't spend too much time on the back catalog. I just interviewed a band for Music Existence called Laney, and they're like this electro pop kind of band, and they're coming out with an Americana album for their next release. And I'm like, okay. I don't need to spend time on the first two records. I want to know where your head at was for this one, because it's a total shift, right? But then again, sometimes, yeah, back catalogs are super important. So
Yeah,
it depends,
totally.
yeah.
Depends on the band. But then you also just listen to like old 70s, 60s, like all that music.
Yeah, but then
So
I
like that.
yeah, but that's important too, because I'm always, if I'm trying to like get to know an artist more before going into an interview, I'll find an interview where they talk about their influences. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, so if this guy's really into like Neil Young and CSNY, like what is it that's drawing him to it and how is he bringing that into his music? And that's a great way to discover new music too. I think some of the more like obscure stuff that my parents don't listen to that I found on my own were all just from whoever I was listening to at the time, them saying like, oh yeah, I grew up with the blues, I love the blues, and then I go and explore that. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if anything, it just shows we're all influenced by each other constantly.
yeah, totally.
No one's unique.
Yeah. Well,
Everyone has their influences for sure.
I think it was last year that came out. Bob Dylan's son Jacob did a documentary called Echo in the Canyon. And it was all about how that mid 60s era in Laurel Canyon was all just inspired by each other. Like Joni Mitchell was borrowing from Gordon Lightfoot, from Neil Young, and they all, like, they openly said, oh, I just took that riff and kind of made it my own, but it was okay then. No one was suing each other like they do now.
Mm-hmm.
So I find it just interesting now, like all the lawsuits that go on with copyright and stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas before it was encouraged to copy each other, and look at the great music that came out of the 60s. Whereas,
Yeah, totally. I
yeah,
think like if anything, it's like cooking. It's like we can all cook the same thing, but we could all put our own twist on it and it'll be unique.
yeah.
But
And I,
like someone can play the G chord and someone else can play the G chord, and it's just like how they play the G chord will
yeah.
just sort of like make it stand out in their own way.
And I'm not a musician, so I don't want to sound too technical, but there's only so many chords out there, so many chord
Mm-hmm.
structures or whatever, that at some point it's just about how you can make the same sounds your own. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. That's where like lyrics will come into play. It's like
Mm-hmm.
how you tell the song is going to be your own.
Actually, the
Yeah,
other
not getting
weekend,
to like don't harbor your notes, people.
yeah, the
Let
other
your
weekend I had a like really long car drive with my brother, and we just made up this game, and it was like doing two songs that were like in a lawsuit against each other, and we had to choose like, okay, whose side are we on? Are we on, Bittersweet Symphony, or are we on the Rolling Stones side? And we, because there's so many examples out there now, with like the Blurred Lines and Marvin Gaye and
Mhm.
Rolling and Sam Smith and Tom Petty, like there's a lot of them, and we'd be like, okay, yeah, that's straight plagiarism. Okay, no, that person needs to come down. That shouldn't be a lawsuit type of thing, right?
Yeah,
So it's
totally.
interesting to see how
That's a
those
fun
unfold.
game.
Well, even this morning, with my dad, I was showing him like some of the weekend's new stuff and how a lot of people are saying it's like directly taken from Rod Stewart and Aha, Take on Me. And I was like, oh, like this is weird. Like I don't know how it's going to turn out, but we'll see.
Do you find that it is? Do you find that it's quite aligned with those sounds?
Well, the thing with The Weeknd and even like Dua Lipa and artists like that is that it's this 80s sound that's coming back, like
Mhm.
these producers over in Europe are bringing back those like electronic sounds from the 80s, and they seem to be performing incredibly well on streaming platforms. So something, I don't know, something about it is clicking, but there's definitely some heavy influences from some of those artists back then.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
I don't know. I'm
I
not
get
a
it.
lawyer,
Like,
so
I guess everyone just has to make a dollar, guys. Like, find a
yeah,
way to make a dollar in the music industry.
yeah. But it's
Find
interesting.
where someone's like made those two notes similar to yours.
Yeah, but it's interesting how those sounds kind of just get recycled and come
Oh,
back.
totally. I think
All,
it's generational, like where kids are listening to their parents' collection as you did, or how your
Mhm,
parents influenced you based on what they played. Because I'm a 90s, like early 2000s rocker kid, and that's like what my dad played for me. So
mhm.
all my reference points are from that moment on.
Yeah,
Kids are listening to a lot of 90s now.
yeah.
So
Well,
I'm wondering if my generation having kids and then they're like listening to the 90s.
yeah, and it all gets tied into like fashion trends too from the 90s are coming back. And, there's this pop artist in Toronto, her name's Ren for short, and they say she's the next Billie Eilish mixed in with Nirvana. And I'm like, how are kids getting comparing those two artists, right? But
That's
yeah,
great. That's awesome. I
mhm,
like it. I'm inspired by kids like just listening to stuff and like making it their own. So
yeah. Well, they're taking over the music industry with TikTok now, so I think we can all learn something from them.
I'm so like reluctant to get on TikTok. I'm like,
I know.
do I need another app? I have so many.
It's crazy. And like you'll be listening to the radio and like a TikTok song will come up, right? And it's like, I don't know the name, I don't know the artist, I just know that it's popular on TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely a weird time for music and social media, but who knows? We'll see what happens.
Yeah. As a journalist, do you think you should be using TikTok to like explore and find artists and or like support your writing?
That is a very good question that I probably should be doing, but TikTok's very like, there's not a lot of rock and roll on TikTok. It's a lot of hip hop, it's a lot of pop music, and it's also a lot of like people who are already notable in the industry kind of don't get famous on TikTok. It's more of these like one hit wonders come out of nowhere, and all of a sudden they're TikTok famous, and then the labels kind of jump on that success and try and, you know.
Mm-hmm. I'm always wondering, how do you make someone TikTok famous? I'm like, how do you do these challenges?
Yeah, but a lot of the research shows that like TikTok, like I said, you just know it as a TikTok song. You don't know the artist. You're not really likely to go search their back catalog or anything like that. So is it good to maybe get 15 minutes of fame on TikTok? Sure, but in the long run, is it going to give you a sustainable career? I don't think so. But yeah. I'm not a 19-year-old, so don't I don't know.
Yeah, totally. I know it's hard to like understand all the different forms of how people digest things. It's pretty wild. Like even in music, I'm just like, wow, there's so many different ways you can go about it, and there's like no right or wrong way to do it. But
yeah,
pretty sweet. Well, I would say that like since you've been working in music in a very like short window, but you've done a lot, and I would say that you have done a lot, even if you think you haven't. Like you've started and like have made a name for yourself to do what you're passionate about. So that's rad. So what would be some advice you could give someone that maybe is looking to start in music and like how to get going? Maybe?
Yeah, I would just go back to kind of finding your own experience, whatever that may be. Try everything. If you need, you know, don't be afraid to volunteer. A lot of people in music have to do a lot of grunt work at the beginning. Don't say no to opportunities. And just like I said, kind of find different areas in the industry that you can learn from. You know, you might not want to do grant writing, but grant writing is really important. And if you can be that person to do grant writing, then that would be ideal, you know? And, you know, like I said, if it takes making a website and having to figure it out for yourself, then hopefully that works out.
That's good advice. Sorry, someone just distracted me with a question. I was like, what? One moment. Can you swing up TikTok? Anyway. Liam was showing me something, but I'd missed it. Sorry. Distracted. I'm a very easily distracted kind of person.
No worries.
My ADD serves me okay in this industry sometimes.
No, it's good.
Because you need to wear many hats at one time.
Yeah, totally. Especially like I said, working with like the smaller labels, you have to be the social media person, you have to be the marketing person. If you're like myself who has their own blog, I'm promo, I'm marketing, I'm everything. So you just gotta figure it out. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I've asked so many people so many questions all the time. Like, how do you do this? How do I do this? How do I get a domain? How do I get what's the difference between like .com and .ca? Like, how do I get advertising? All this stuff I never thought I would have to worry about. Now I do. And it's, you know, like I didn't learn any of that stuff in school. So that's just figuring it out and probably making mistakes along the way, but that's okay.
Oh, that's like 200% okay. I just use 200% as my gauge. But yeah, I would say making mistakes is like what you want to do because it's really the only way to learn. Like you don't come into the industry with perfect understanding of how to do anything.
Of course. And like I said too, like don't be afraid to kind of branch out to different artists or different opportunities you don't think you would like, because it could turn out into being something really beneficial for your career.
Yeah, totally. So how do people reach you if they want to get in touch with you, if they make rock and roll?
Well, you should follow Rock is Dead on Instagram. It's rockis_dead. And you can follow my personal account on Instagram too. That's at Katie Timo, Tymo. you should check out Rock is Dead because we just relaunched yesterday and it's like a flashy new site now, lots of lights and colors, and it's beautiful. I spent all summer working on it, and that's
Nice.
www.rockisdead.ca. And there's an email page on there. So if you want to send over some music for us to check out, let us know. We're always trying to profile new bands and kind of like, you know, new bands and old bands. It's everything. So go check it out. And yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, it was nice to talk to you and like learn about what you've done.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye, everybody. Ciao.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.